feel like my lighting settings are all over the place. I'm not used to it anymore. I don't really know what I'm doing. That light's annoying me. It's in my eye. Welcome back to this. Hi or welcome. I mean, I don't know why I'm so presumptuous that you've seen me before. You might not have, because this is slightly different to what I've done before. A kind of different genre, if you will. I've done a lot of reaction videos, if you don't know, to Killing Eve, The Wilds, and a bunch of different films. This is different though. This month I challenged myself with watching a new horror or Halloween movie every day of the month. And when I say new, I don't mean like new 2020 release. It's not 2020, 2022 release. I mean new for me. So horrors or Halloween movies that I haven't seen. That doesn't mean that I can't watch horror or Halloween movies that I have seen within this though. So those are going to be included because it's October. So I had to watch some of the favorites, you know? Had to get those in. It's been a very busy month. Let me tell you, it has been a busy month. I have watched a total of 41 new films this month. That's so much. It's so much. Also, please note that this is a cold sore. That's all I have to say about that. The point is, it's not smudged lipstick or anything. It's a cold. I don't even know if it's a cold. It's not even, it's like a cracked lip, but it's been like this for like 2 weeks. So now that's out of the way, let's get into the main video. So basically, I'm going to go through my Letterboxd list. I created a list of all the different films that I was watching this month. Not all the films I was watching, because the 41 movies that I watched are not all horrors. I didn't mention that. I watched 41 new films. Not all of them were horrors or Halloween movies. So I'm not going to be discussing the ones that aren't. I'm just going to be talking about the ones that are within that genre. So yeah, I'm going to be going on Letterboxd. If you don't follow me on Letterboxd, what on earth are you doing? My username is Scarlet Mask, M-A-S-Q, just like erase. Yeah, follow me on there. I'm addicted to the app. We're going to start October 1st. What did I watch on October 1st? I watched Creep 2, I believe on Netflix. I'm going to be giving short kind of like descriptions of my opinion for each of these films because obviously we have a lot to go through, so I'm not going to go too in depth with any of them. I'll just give you my rating and kind of why I gave it that. So for Creep 2, I gave it a 3. I'm pretty sure I gave Creep 2.5, which may be harsh. I watched it a little while ago, although the fact that Creep 2 only has 3 makes me think I probably wouldn't be raised that much more. And I do like the way it's done. I think it's a very unique setup. He basically approaches this woman and says, I'm gonna commit a murder and I want you to film it. And she's like, okay, well, I'm along for the ride. So it's a very interesting concept. I just thought parts dragged, which I thought was the case with the first one too. But that does make it kind of more authentic. It makes it feel like an imperfect YouTube video that someone's put up. And, you know, moments are too dragged out and that makes it a bit more uncomfortable. And so I do understand what they were doing. Yeah, I guess enjoyability wise, it also comes into it. Like, it was a 3 out of 5, which is still good, but not fantastic. On October 2nd, I watched the remake of Funny Games. I have not seen the original, so I can't give any comparison, but I enjoyed this quite a lot. I gave it 3.5. I love Naomi Watts. Honestly, I'll watch anything with her in. My favorite horror film for the longest time was The Ring. It was like my first one that I really got attached to when I was like 13. So always got a soft spot for Naomi. It was very, very uncomfortable. They broke many rules. Like there was a lot of breaking the fourth wall from this one character, from one of the intruders. And it made me feel very uneasy. Again, parts of it were very dragged out and long and it was just kind of one shot. But in this case, I thought it worked kind of better than Creep 2 because it felt more intentional and it felt very stylistic as well. Like it didn't feel of the 2000s, which is when it came out. It felt older, so probably like playing on the fact that it is a remake. And it shocked me in ways that I didn't think it was brave enough to do. The last third of it, maybe the third act, I think did let it down a little bit, just because that part really kind of dragged and all of the tension had kind of dissipated by that point. So that did let it down for me a little bit. On October 3rd, I watched What We Do in the Shadows, which is obviously the movie not adaptation, but the movie spin-off of the TV show. I'd actually never heard of the TV show. I know it is now, but I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I think that maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I'd watched the TV show, or if I was it was very goofy. It was a goofy vampire film, very silly, but well done in certain ways. It kind of felt like Horrible Histories in a way, if that makes sense. Like, the way it was done was so over the top goofy at points that it just kind of made it lame and like childish. And I just wanted a bit more oomph, you know what I mean? It wasn't really my style of humour. Although certain bits were, to be fair. The 4th film I watched was Triangle, which I gave 3.5. This was a crazy film. Going into it, I had no preconceptions, so I don't want to give too much away because you need to not have any preconceptions either. But when I tell you that it's not what you expect, you just gotta take my word. Take me word, matey. But yeah, no, it was very psychological, very much psychological thriller, quite confusing. By the end of it, you aren't entirely sure what's happened, but I wasn't mad about that. Hence why I gave it a 3.5. It was quite basic. Like, in total, it was quite a basic film, but you know, sometimes you need that. The 5th film I watched, and this was a rewatch, was Hocus Pocus. I watched it first when I was, I want to say like 7 or 8, and I remember not really enjoying it. And then I watched it again when I was like maybe 13, 14. Again, didn't really enjoy it. I don't know why I rewatched it. That's a lie, I do. I rewatched it in preparation for Hocus Pocus 2 because I was very much wanting to watch that. And oh my God, I don't know if it's me that's changed. I mean, it is me that's changed because the movie stayed the same, but Jesus Christ, I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. 4.5-star movie, without a shadow of a doubt. Probably a 5-star movie if we're really being honest with ourselves. I thought it was so well done and so of the era. And, you know, that gives it kind of like, I'm being lenient to its flaws, you know, like the special effect flaws, or that's me giving it a pass in some ways, but I'm also not mad about it. I liked it, like the special effects, the bad special effects added to the entire atmosphere. The witches were amazing. I remember wanting to be Sarah Jessica Parker when I was like 7 and watching that movie. I still do. It was so much fun, and I can't believe I've slept on it for all these years. I'm honestly mad at myself. The 5th film I watched was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I've never seen before, surprisingly. I haven't seen a lot of the classics. Even though horror is my favourite genre, I have not seen basically all the ones you should have seen. Those are the ones I haven't seen. So anyway, I was trying to catch up this month. I didn't really do a good job, but this is one that I did do, and I gave it 4 stars, which midway through the movie, if you were to ask me what I was going to give it, I probably would say like 3 stars. But that last half an hour was so grueling, and I've truly never seen anything like it. And the fact that it's such an old film and it stands up so well, I think, like, it is really bone-chillingly horrifying in a way that it's not, you know, it's not too bloody, it's not too this, it's not too that. It's just the way it's done. The acting in particular is just phenomenal, particularly of the main girl when she's literally screaming for half an hour. I'm like, how do you have that stamina? The last half an hour saved it for me. The first hour or so, it was just kind of slow, and I was like, yeah, we get it, they're being killed or whatever. But yeah, the last half an hour really just raised it to another level. The 6th film I watched was The House of the Devil by T West. I believe it's T West, it might be Ty West, who obviously released X and Pearl this year. Busy year for old T/Ty. I don't even know what I'm talking about. X I loved though, and I thought it was so well made considering it was supposed to be set in the 70s. Can you hear that in the background? Is that like the loudest in the world? Oh, no! You may have been able to hear that film for like the entire first bit of this video. The House of the Devil. So yeah, set in the 1980s and feels like it's the 1980s. Really, honestly, truly, that was the craziest part of this film for me, and is the reason that it got 4 stars in the end, was because of the atmosphere. It just, like, watch it and tell me it's not the 80s, because it just everything about it feels like the 80s. I'm pretty sure it's shot on film, which obviously helps. The colour scheme, like, it was mad. It was so well done, like, beyond anything I've ever seen before of, not period piece, because the 1980s is not a period piece. But you get what I'm saying. And the end scene, again, very slow start, but then once the third act comes in, I don't even know if it could be called the third act, the fifth act. Once that kicks in, it really makes up for lost time, I think, personally. And I love the stylisticness of the first bit anyway. And Greta Gerwig's in it, and she's very funny. So that's nice. Did I say that was the 6th? That was the 7th. This is the 8th. The 8th film I watched was Let the Right One In, which is, what is it? Is it Stockholm, Sweden? It's a Swedish film. If Stockholm isn't in Sweden, I'm gonna look so dumb. It's a Swedish film, and there is an American remake, I believe, with Chloe Grace Moretz called Let Her In or something. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but I did enjoy this. Yes, I did. I gave it 3.5. I think that for me, it wasn't exactly my personal taste. I'm not going to say too much about it, but there is something in the film that isn't revealed in the film, but was revealed in the book or something that it was based on. And it kind of changed a lot of the movie for me, and I think pushed it up to that 3.5 star. That's the most cryptic thing I could ever possibly say. So I'm sorry about that. Check my Letterboxd review if you want to know what that thing is, because I didn't know. I don't even think a lot of the Letterboxd people knew because it wasn't in the reviews that much. Like, it's something you have to dig for, but it's such an interesting part of the movie that I think really adds to it. I appreciated that, but not entirely my sort of film. The 9th film I watched was VHS 94. I have not seen any of the VHSs. No, I have now. I had not seen any of them. So this was kind of a new idea for me, this kind of anthology. I don't even think I've seen any anthology in terms of like a horror kind of anthology before. But I enjoyed it. I thought that some segments were better than others, which is obviously going to be the case since they have different writers and directors. But I liked how it kind of was all tied up with that one storyline. I didn't think it worked super well. I liked the thought. I liked the intention. I didn't like the execution necessarily. I gave it 3 stars. And that was just kind of by like, I gave star rating to each of the mini short films, and then I like averaged it out overall. It was good and it was creepy, and it was, you know, it's very good for someone who has short attention span because it's like a series, right? Because you have loads of short stories within one longer movie. Yeah, it was a good change of pace. The 10th film I watched was Hocus Pocus 2, which was interesting. I think that a lot of the power that Hocus Pocus 2 probably had was through nostalgia, and since Hocus Pocus 1 was not a childhood film for me necessarily, it didn't hold the same weight. I originally gave the film 2.5 stars and then later bumped it up to a 3, purely because of the iconicness of the characters and the fact that this is 29 years later, and it was just kind of like more of a feeling based rating as opposed to like how good it was. The One Way or Another cover was fun, but anything that they tried to do in the movie, like that for example, just made me think, oh well, it was done in the first movie so much better. So in ways it kind of just rubbed the salt in the wound more of like, oh well, this isn't the first movie and you're trying to make it like the first movie, but it's just not working in some ways. The 11th film I watched was the original Suspiria. So I had seen the remake of Suspiria before this at some point. I don't remember when, a few years ago, and I was not that keen on it at all. So I watched the original to try and, you know, see what the deal was, and they are 2 different movies. Like, totally. If you don't like one, then do not, you know, give up on the other, because they are not the same. I love this film. I thought it was great. I gave it a 4.5. That was the highest rating I gave to a new movie this month. I would say it was probably my favourite new movie that I watched this month. I loved the aesthetic of it. I mean, naturally, that is the thing that is the most unique about this film, and the colours and the 70s-ness of it. It felt very authentic and quirky. Yeah, it was kind of unlike anything I've ever seen before in the best way possible. And I like the story a lot as well. And it was kind of, you know, if you've seen both the story and the remake, is kind of contorted and doesn't make much sense. I think they tried to like complicate it in ways that wasn't really necessary and just ended up being confusing. This was much more stripped down in terms of a plot, but that was okay because all of the lights and colours and acting, the fact that the whole film is dubbed over, it adds like this crazy, weird, like creepy element to it. And so it's okay that plot is basic because there's so much else going on that kind of occupies you. The 12th film I watched was You Are Not My Mother. I had really high hopes for this going in, and then for like the first 2 acts as well, I had very high hopes. And then in the 3rd act, it just kind of lost me in general. I very much thought it was going to be about the mother's mental health and kind of a metaphor for mental health. But then it just turned out to actually just be about like the devil or something, which is fine. I just wish it would have tied in a bit more. Like why was the mum mentally ill? Like what kind of relevance did that have? And it, you know, the friendship that the girl is making, the daughter, and how she's kind of a loner, and then she makes these friendships and whatever. And I kind of wanted it to all tie up nicely and have some sort of message at the end, just because there seemed to be so many strong themes running through the first 2 acts, and they were just dropped in the end, and it was just like, oh, and now everything's okay. Yeah, it was just the themes, the intention. I didn't know what the intention was, and it felt a bit arbitrary in the end. Okay, so if I said that I watched these new films, if I at any point said these are my new film watches, I lied. These are my new watches, because the 13th thing that I have logged is the Dahmer series, which I'm gonna include because I include series on Letterboxd. I know it's a big thing of controversy. No, I log series. If it's on Letterboxd, I will log it. And I included series this month because to me series are just films. Like if they are limited series like that, then it is a film. Or if it's an episode of something, which you'll see later, and it works like a film, then it's a film. It's a short film to me. Obviously, if it's like Friends, that's not a film. That is a series. Anyway, I have opinions about this. But anyway, 13th, Dahmer. Oh, this was crazy. This was a crazy show. Ryan Murphy didn't know he had it in him, if I'm being totally honest. American Horror Story wasn't this gritty, I would say. American Horror Story was like kind of fruity. You know what I mean? Like it had the glee. It had the glee in it. I was like, okay, this guy created Glee. This guy created Glee? Who knew? Honestly, I thought it was very well done. I gave it a 4 stars, which, I mean, honestly, I could see myself giving it a 4.5, but I think if it had been shorter, I would have given it a 4.5. Some bits, again, felt a bit drawn out for me, but I loved the way it was done, particularly the first episode. I feel like the first episode really drew everyone in because it was just so raw and real and upfront, like from the get-go. It wasn't like, this is a biography. Like you are deep in, at the deep end. And I loved the timeline of it as well, the way it was like flashback and forward and started with the murder that in the end got him caught. Like I thought that was so cool. Obviously there's a lot of controversy, did I say it, about the fact that he made it without the family's consent. I'm pretty sure. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct, but I'm pretty sure that's what I've heard. And that's not great. And that's kind of entirely the opposite of the message that the series was putting out there. But if we're basing it on the actual art of it and the way it was done and kind of like ignoring the problems with the production itself, yeah, super well done. And I think very much worth the time of anyone who is interested in the story, like Dahmer's story. I mean, I wasn't beforehand, but now I'm kind of fascinated. The 14th thing I watched was the remake of Suspiria. Again, rewatch, obviously, but I felt like I had to give it another shot after enjoying the first one so much. And I did raise my rating from the first time I watched it. The first time I watched it, I gave it a 2.5. This time I gave it a 3. But yeah, no, it's again, it's the 3rd act that makes it make absolutely no sense. I get it, and like people will try and defend the plot. Sure, say whatever you want. But again, in terms of intention, as we figured out, intention is very important to me. I didn't know what the intention was. What the hell was the character's intention? That is my main problem with this. It's like, if a character doesn't have a clear intention, then you've lost me, because I don't care anymore. Like it was beautiful. It was beautifully done, and it was very different to the original. It was very kind of grey, with like obviously the bright red. That was kind of the only bright colour in it of like note, I suppose. But I think it was trying so hard to be something that it just wasn't. And it's a 2.5-hour film. The original is an hour and a half. This is a 2.5-hour film, and for what? Like, truly, what did it add? It tried to be political, didn't work, didn't tie in properly. It tried to do so much, maybe too much, and none of it really tied together. Gorgeous visuals, and to be fair, that's the only thing that's giving it 3. The acting was also good, and Tilda Swinton plays 3 characters, if you weren't aware. That's not a spoiler. It's not really important. It doesn't really add to it at all, but yeah, that's cool, I suppose. The 15th film I watched was Hellraiser, which, honestly, a crazy time. This was one of the most notable films I watched this month. Like, one of the films that stuck out to me most, that has stayed with me the most. I started it and thought it was kind of ridiculous, particularly when I saw the goo monster. Don't need to give much clarification on that. If you know, you know. I was just like, that's very fake looking, and obviously it's in the 80s, so you've got to give it some kind of benefit of the doubt, but it seemed all very kind of over dramatic in a way that just wasn't resonating with me. And then the film crept on and on and on and on, and I was sucked in, you could say. I did think the film was going to be about the Cenobites and Pinhead. Like, I thought that they were going to be the main lot of the film, and to find out they weren't, I was kind of disappointed, because I thought they looked freaky, and a lot freakier than the Goo Man. But once the Goo Man started to form a little bit, I don't know, it was oddly charming. I liked it quite a lot. I gave it 3.5, but I'm kind of thinking about bumping it up to a 4, if I'm being honest, because it stuck with me, and I can't really tell you why. So that's helpful for everyone. The 15th thing I watched was Black Mirror White Bear, which obviously is a Black Mirror episode, and I have a weird history of Black Mirror, being that I don't like it, which is odd because I love anything freaky or whatever, and that is very much what Black Mirror is. But for me, Black Mirror is too tame. It feels a bit lame. The whole technology is taking over the world. Like, I just feel like it's been done better than in Black Mirror. This one was good though. White Bear was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I think it's like one of the most famous Black Mirror episodes, and when you look up like the scariest episodes, like that's one of the ones that comes up. And it was-ish, not really. The concept was cool. I had many questions, which I always do with Black Mirror episodes. I always think that they're quite inconsistent within themselves. So that annoyed me, but yeah, it was fine. The 17th thing I watched was The Amusement Park. So this was a restoration on Shudder, and I don't know if it's anywhere else. I'm pretty sure it said Shudder exclusive, but this was a crazy film. It was 54 minutes long, and it was basically a long PSA video. And in fact, I'm pretty sure when it was made, it was supposed to be like a film about why you should respect your elders more, which is basically the entire plot of it. This guy, this old man, basically goes to this amusement park, and it mirrors all of life, like how elderly people are treated in life and how they can easily be conned or taken advantage of or whatever. And it's much more kind of gruesome because it's a metaphor, so he ends up being beaten up and stuff. And it was crazy to watch. I think I gave it 3.5. It was really well done, and the acting was really heartbreaking. Yeah, a hidden gem, I would say. Definitely check it out if you're on Shudder. The 18th film I watched was X, which, again, a rewatch. I love this film so much. 4.5 stars. I think it's so funny. Maybe I find it funnier than most people, but I think it's hilarious, and I think it's gorgeous, and I think it's amazing. Like, the whole porno that turns into a slasher halfway through. I think it's genius in every way. I love the fact that, you know, most pornos, it is kind of like, not that I watch a lot, but pornos kind of have that stereotype of the plot not making any sense, or like, you know, something happening for the first half of it and then suddenly they're having sex on a table, and it's like, oh, okay, fine. Just abandon any plot that you possibly ever had or any character ideas you possibly ever had, because that's more important. That's the point of the film, what we're all waiting for. X kind of functions exactly the same way, and halfway through becomes a slasher. You're kind of like, this is not what the point of this film was, and we've kind of just like lost that all, but now it's a slasher, and so it kind of mirrors the structure of a porno, which I think is funny. I think it's all very funny, and I love it. It's great. 19th film, VHS. Those weren't words. And they're not words, they're letters. VHS 2. This I liked more than VHS 94, was it that I watched? Yeah. I gave this one a 3.5. just down to the fact that I thought that the little short films in it were stronger overall. The one with the cult, again, if you know, you know, that was a crazy one. That was the best one, and I think that that's kind of like a all-around opinion from most people. I also thought that the short film that was tying all the films together was a lot stronger. It felt like a much stronger movie in general. It just felt kind of more coherent. The 20th thing I watched was Black Mirror Black Museum, which I don't know why I tried again with a Black Mirror. I think I needed something short and this is only like an hour. I enjoyed this one more. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is my favourite Black Mirror episode I've ever seen. So I gave it 3.5. Again, it's an anthology. Is it medical? I think it's all medical. Yeah, they kind of were all kind of technology, medicine-based kind of stories. There are only 3, which felt weird to me, only because they weren't all tied together in a way. Like, by the end of the episode, the only 2 things that really mattered were the last 2 stories in terms of like the overarching story that's connecting them all. You only really need to know about the last 2 stories for any of it to make sense. The first story just kind of becomes irrelevant. So that kind of annoyed me. Yeah, apart from that, I thought it was well done and I thought it was unique in terms of story. Yeah, it was a good one. It was a good one. Best Black Mirror episode I've ever seen, so can't complain. The 21st film that I watched was The Hills Have Eyes. I never really given much thought to watching this. It's never really been on my watch list, but I think I just felt spontaneous, you could say. It let me down a little bit, not gonna lie, my spontaneity. I didn't love this. I thought it was fine. It was very much of the time again. I thought it was quite funny. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to, but I did find some of the characters quite funny, the way that they were acting. It was all kind of like very dramatic and flaily, and I thought that was entertaining. In total, I was like, this is... It all just felt kind of redundant. I don't know why. It didn't feel super gory. It didn't feel super like creepy. It didn't feel super anything. It just kind of felt like it was a film. So I gave it 3. I thought it was well made in terms of like they shot it with a camera. Yeah, it didn't do anything special for me. The 22nd film I watched was Watcher, and I had high hopes for this, which let me down. Starring Micah Monroe, who is slowly but surely becoming a scream queen. If she's not already, I mean, you could probably call it that already. And I think she's amazing. I also have a big, big crush on her, so that helps. This film was, again, just a bit of nothing, it feels like. I feel like when you're watching a horror or Halloween movie every day, you start to get higher expectations, you know, because you're comparing them all to each other. And this just didn't stand out for me. It's a stalker movie, and it very much kept you guessing. You felt quite unsure of where the truth was and what was actually happening, which was fun. But it was quite slow and drawn out, and the payoff just wasn't worth it, I don't think. So I gave it a 3. Yeah, kind of disappointing. 23rd film I watched was Who Invited Them? It was fine, extremely predictable, like one of the most predictable films I've ever seen. But it was entertaining in ways that I kind of wasn't expecting going into it. And that kind of kept me, even though I definitely knew what the ending was going to be from the get-go, I was kind of like, well, I'm enjoying these guys playing around. Like, I'm enjoying watching it enough. So I gave it a 3, you know, a solid 3. The 24th film I watched was Saw, which was crazy that I've never seen it before. I've seen Jigsaw, so that, if you've seen Jigsaw, you'll know that that spoils the original Saw. I won't say too much again, but there's obviously quite a big twist in the original Saw. Not big twist necessarily, but certainly a twist of certain magnitude. But I already knew it because of Jigsaw, so I think that ruined some elements for me. I gave it 3.5 stars. Maybe would boost it up to a 4 upon second watching. Definitely want to watch it again, but I think that there were moments that were kind of thrown in that felt arbitrary. It felt like they were trying to kind of like go along some gore route, but then didn't actually follow through with it. But the fact, I'm okay with random arbitrary gore, like give it to me, I don't mind. But they were giving me arbitrary kind of like little bits and bobs here and there that were not gory. I think they were supposed to be, maybe, but they just weren't. I would say it's a very tame film. Maybe I would give it a 4 on second watching, I really can't say. But I did like the acting, it very much felt like a 2000s film, which again, I have like a liking for the kind of 2000s style. It makes me feel nostalgic. The 25th film I watched was Veronica, and this is because truly the only reason I watched this film was because I was flying back from Ibiza, and while in Ibiza I hadn't watched a Spanish film, so I was like, I gotta watch one on the plane ride back. So I chose Veronica. Don't know why. I don't know why. I truly don't. I just saw it and was like, yep, that'll do. It was fine. It was okay. It was based on a true story-ish. I mean, it's about a girl being possessed, essentially. So how true can that be? True events. It was inspired by true events, which is interesting because it's a supernatural horror. Like, you don't see many supernatural horrors that are inspired by true events, apart from like The Conjuring, right? Or Annabelle. Anyway, I thought parts of it were well done, but then other parts of it, again, felt arbitrary. There were some shots that were done that were like trying to make it kind of like, what's the word, like cerebral. They weren't consistent. Like, it felt very naturalistic for like the entire film, and then like a couple of moments would be like the cerebral, like dreamlike thing, and I was like, where has this come from? And so that annoyed me. The acting was very good considering like they were all kids, but again, yeah, payoff wasn't fantastic. It felt kind of drawn out. You kind of knew where it was going. It didn't blow me away. The 26th film I watched was Host, which was the 2020 release. I know that there's like multiple films called Host of like some sort, The Host. This was only 57 minutes, which is kind of crazy. The entire thing is on a Zoom call in COVID, which, if I'm being honest, I'm done with the whole like, we're in COVID, oh my god, like we have to call on Zoom. I don't know what that was. In fact, I hated that. Just please, let's go back. I'm getting bored of the COVID narrative of, oh my god, isn't it crazy we're on Zoom? Because I've lived through it, you know, and I lived through it quite recently, and I'm bored of it. Like, I know, like, the online quizzes, how fun. The online seances, I never did any of that, but like, I would have if someone brought it up to me. Like, that's kind of a cool idea. And it was a cool idea. I think if I'd watched it during the pandemic, I would have had a lot more time for it, because I would have found it more relatable, but now I just find it kind of like tedious and trying to be too relatable, and that annoys me. And it was fine. The acting was good. The supernatural stuff was fine. It was fine. Like, it was only fine, you know what I mean? I gave it a 3. Did I say that already? I gave it a 3. The humour in it was fine. Moments were funny, but a lot of it felt very scripted to me, which is always difficult to do when you're on a Zoom call, because obviously that's a very naturalistic setting. So if it doesn't feel naturalistic script-wise, then I feel like it lets the whole thing down. And it did feel very kind of like scripted, particularly the humour. The 27th film I watched was Daughter of Darkness, which was a very rogue one for me to watch. I found this on YouTube, and the only reason I watched it was for Mia Sara, who is the most gorgeous woman on this planet. If you don't know her, yes you do. She is Sloane in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and I mean, I watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off a few years ago and fell in love with her, and I'm still in love with her, and that's the only reason I watched this film. Although it's also got Anthony Perkins in, and that was cool. Kind of a crazy, I'd never expected to see that duo together. It was a fine film. All of these films are just fine, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't blow me away. I gave it 3 stars. Surprisingly, I really liked the aesthetic of it, and I think that saved it for me. It felt very 80s dramatic horror in a way that was kind of like humorous in a way. Again, like, is this a spoiler to say it's vampires? Oh, I've said it now. I feel like vampires are I feel like it's very camp. It's a very camp subject matter. So you can have a lot of fun with it, and I think they did have a lot of fun with it. And there were parts that truly were quite, not terrifying, but scary, and so well played, you know? Anthony Perkins is a great actor. Mia Sara is a great actor. But it just didn't, it felt like a low budget, like, it didn't feel like a proper movie. I only know, like, in the least offensive way possible, it just didn't feel real. Also, I wrote a love song for Mia Sara, so if you want to check that out, this is the acoustic version of it. She's hot, that's all I can say. That's all I can say. The 28th film I watched was Alice, which was the 1988 release. It's a Czech film. Bizarre, honestly. Was expecting more horror from it, which I didn't really get. It was kind of more eerie and creepy, and I think as a kid I would have loved it. Like, if I had watched it when I was a kid, I don't think it is a kid's film because it literally, like, the tagline is a film made for children, perhaps. So I don't think it is aimed at kids, but it's still the Alice in Wonderland story. It's kind of a mix between live action and stop motion, which stop motion is always cool. I always have time for stop motion. But a bit more creepy and a bit more sinister in some ways. Just not as much as I wanted it to be. Nevertheless, I gave it 4 stars because of how well made it was and how unique it was. I've truly never seen anything like it, and I think that it would be a great one to watch when high. If I'm going to recommend anything, I think that would add to the scare value. The 29th film I watched was Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, which I did watch while high. Legally high. I was on Valium, which is prescribed by my doctor. Oh my god. Talk about a film to watch while you're high. Jesus Christ. I mean, actually, I think it maybe did make more sense to me because I was, like, not with it than if I was with it. The next morning I woke up and was kind of like, what was that film about? Like, what? And I kind of, like, did some research into it and was like, oh, so truly that film was crazy. Like, it kind of was about nothing and everything all at the same time. Very much about, like, an adolescent girl kind of coming to terms with the world and how she's gonna navigate it. Classic coming of age tale, but told in a very different kind of way. And I loved it. I thought it was beautiful and ethereal and aesthetically pleasing. And while it didn't make total sense plot-wise, on a feelings level, on an emotional level, it kind of did make sense. It was so hard to kind of dissect, yet very relatable. And I don't quite know how they managed to do that, but it kind of just was what it feels like to be a girl coming to terms with, like, the real world in a very metaphoric, messed up way. The 30th film I watched was House LLC. Is that LLC? Why is it LLC? I don't know. But I've heard about this film before. Another found footage film, which obviously both of the VHSs are found footage. Creep was found footage. So I've watched quite a few of those this month, and this was one of the better ones I'd seen in terms of naturalistic acting. Again, if you're doing something like Zoom or found footage, it has to feel very naturalistic because of just obvious reasons. So acting, very much I was in it to win it. But the film just slowly let me down as it went on. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I think it felt quite confused in a lot of ways. There's this one bit in the film, and I will say it because it's not a spoiler, because literally it doesn't make sense, where basically they're doing this haunted house and creepy things are happening in the house, and one of them wants to leave, and basically another one of them says he can't leave because of this reason that is kind of like led up to, like, I'll tell you why, and it like cuts, and then you see them again, and it's like, God, so I really can't leave. And you never find out why. Like, you never find out the reason. Isn't that bizarre? I just find that bizarre. And it turns out that they do explain the reason in an earlier version of the film that's longer, and they had to cut it for time. What a weird thing to cut for time. Also, it just could have been so much more gory. Like, they had so much potential with this film, and it was not explored at all. It was very tame. So while the acting was good, yeah, it just, in general, just not worth it. The 31st film I watched was A Tale of Two Sisters, which is Korean, I believe. This film, again, I guessed the ending. I don't want to say too much, but I guessed the ending, which did kind of ruin it for me a little bit. Still gave it 4 stars because I thought it was really well done. But I believe it's a very predictable ending because it's kind of been done a lot now. Maybe in 2003 it hadn't been, but now it has. But I thought it was very well done. I thought it was a very typical story, but a very well done version of the story. Maybe the best version of the typical twist. And I loved the acting. That really did stand out for me the most. That was the best part of the film. The 32nd movie that I watched was, again, a rewatch, and it was Scream, which I actually bumped up from a 4 star to a 4.5 star, which is all very exciting. I watched this with my parents, who didn't really remember it. I know it very well. It's just so much fun. It's so much fun. It's such a classic. I think it's done really well, and it's unique. It is. I mean, obviously it's unique in terms of the meta-ness. The thing is with Scream, right, is it doesn't go so far as like Scary Movie that it's like a parody of a horror movie. Like it's still self-aware enough to be funny. It sits very carefully on the line between being self-aware and funny and being completely ridiculous. it works perfectly because the horror still works and the funniness works. That's what I'm trying to say. It's great. The 33rd film I watched was Glorious, which, this was my least favourite film of the month. I gave it 2 stars, and there's not much worth talking about. Again, a super predictable ending. Although I'm not sure if it is, but I did predict it very early on. And I think that the ending is one of those things that recontextualizes the whole thing once you know it, like once you know a certain piece of information, but I just guessed it, so then it didn't really do that for me. It was just kind of a bit silly. J.K. Simmons was in it. Like, it's kind of just, it only has 2 characters the entire time in a public bathroom stall. But again, it was kind of like these themes that didn't really tie up. Like, it felt all very kind of like dramatic, and for what, you know? I don't really know what your point is here. And I know you're trying to make one. That's always the worst, like when they're trying to make a point, but it's not working. The 34th film I watched last night, actually, was Wendell Wild, which, God, I had high hopes for this film. It's Jordan Peele and Henry Selick. Henry Selick being the director of Coraline, which is one of my all-time favourite films, and Jordan Peele being an icon. Us is also one of my all-time favourite films, and obviously Get Out. And I was so excited for this. Another stop motion, love stop motion, but it was just too overpacked. It's on Netflix at the moment, would recommend checking it out. It's got a trans character, which is crazy to me, which it's crazy that it's crazy, but it was crazy. I really respected that because obviously it is a cartoon, it's a kids film, and there's a trans character in it, which I thought was fantastic. But it was just too overpacked. I believe it's Henry Selick's concept, and he's been wanting to make this film for a while, and then collaborated with Jordan Peele to write it. And I don't know, somewhere along the way, it got lost. Like, they tried to do too much. I think it would work as a mini-series quite well, and to explore the different characters more, and kind of like the different storylines a bit more, but at the moment, it's just loads of storylines that are too short to attach yourself to, and it doesn't really work. The 35th film I watched just now was Slither. This was crazy. I've said that about, like, either my reviews are, this was okay, this was like boring, or this was crazy. Like, there is an in-between and I need to learn where it is. A horror comedy starring Elizabeth Banks. Cannot go wrong. It was very unique, if you can say that. Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was funny, and it was quite gruesome in ways that I wasn't expecting it to go there, but I'm very happy that it did. So yeah, solid 3.5 stars. And then tomorrow, we're on October 30th right now. Tomorrow, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have time for a new watch because my friend is coming all the way from America, except she's in the Netherlands at the moment. So all the way from the Netherlands. But we are gonna be watching Coraline tomorrow because that is our joint favorite film, and it's Halloween. So what better way than to celebrate it than watching Coraline? I don't feel like I spoke correctly. I'm also sorry for the length, I'm gonna assume, because I just calculated in my head. I'm speaking about over 30 movies. If I speak about each of them for 2 minutes, that is an hour. I speak a lot, so it's, sorry. If you've made it this far, why? But thank you. And I hope you have a very spooky Halloween, and I would recommend checking some of these out, the ones that I said, not the ones I didn't say. Do not check out Glorious. It's just not worth it. Anyway, I've had quite a lot of luck this month, I'd say. A lot of 3 stars, which is, you know, pretty average. It's still a good film, I'd say. A 3-star film is still good. Yeah, it's been a crazy month. Stay spooky and have fun this Halloween. Stay safe, hey? I'll be watching you, all right? Hey, stay safe. So annoying.